And the final thing we're going to talk about here is the cleanup policies. So again, in the administration view, here have the cleanup policies, which help you decide rules that will clean up artifacts, the components from the repository, either when they're too old or they haven't been used for a long time, etc., in order to free up storage for newer components. So let's click inside. Right now we don't have any. The list is empty. And creating one is actually pretty simple. Here we have the name and format. So you can configure one for a specific format. In our case, let's choose Maven 2. We have a set of options here. First, we can define whether we want to clean up only the releases or only snapshots, also referred to as pre-releases, or whether we want to clean up both types of components. We will leave this as the default to automatically clean up both. And these are the rules or criteria when or how it will be decided which components to delete or clean up, so to say. So with this, you can clean up images that have been published some time ago. And here you can define it in number of days. So for example, everything that has been published more than 30 days ago. Then we have the next criteria. So with this, you can define to clean up or delete any components which haven't been downloaded within a given number of days. So none of its assets got downloaded or used or fetched within a certain amount of days. You can define it here as well. Let's say 20. And you can use them separately or in combination. And here you have more specific one where you can target the names of the artifacts. So for example, if you have the same name with different versions, you can write expressions here to, for example, delete the older versions. Or you can write regular expressions to target specific component names or group of component names and so on. In our case, we just have 3 components which are pretty recent. So I'm gonna click away all this, and just to demonstrate, I'm just gonna set here a regular expression to match all Maven 2 format components in the whole Nexus. And I can do something called preview results, because usually when you configure this, as you see, we're not choosing a certain repository, we're defining rules for the whole Nexus. So if you don't want to clean up or delete some components unintentionally, you can actually do preview results before you actually configure that policy. And for example, if I choose snapshots repository from here and do preview, I see what components will be deleted as a result of my policy. And once you have configured all of this, you can click on Save, and this will create a cleanup policy with all these settings. So now we have created a cleanup policy that has the asset name matcher configured. This basically just matches everything in the repository because the other rules do not work for us. And now we need to associate this cleanup policy to a repository that we want to clean up regularly. So right now, this is just a resource available in the Nexus. It doesn't do anything until we assign it to a repository. So in order to do that, we're going to go to repositories, list in the admin view. And we want to associate this with Maven snapshots repository. This is the only one that has jar files. And at the end of the configuration settings, here you have the cleanup policy, and you can apply that one to the repository. And I'm going to do save. And now when the cleanup policy gets applied on this repository, it will clean up all the artifacts. Of course, you can attach the same cleanup policy to multiple repositories if you want to, and it's going to apply to all of them when the cleanup task runs. And this will run automatically. So the question is now, when will this cleanup policy actually run? Because if we go back here and see our repository, the components are still there. As soon as we create a cleanup policy, a task got created in Nexus. If we go down to System here and tasks. These are the scheduled tasks of Nexus. Here you see the cleanup service. So cleanup service task got created. It's in waiting status, and this is when it's gonna get executed. So it is usually executing by default at night, at the beginning of a day. So once a day, the cleanup policies will be enforced when this cleanup task gets executed automatically. And here you see you can create new tasks manually. And this is a list of the tasks that you have available. And one of them is admin compact blob store. Now, an interesting thing, or also important thing with cleanup policies and cleaning up components from a repository is that they will not actually get deleted. They will be marked for deletion. This is called soft delete. So if we want to actually delete those items in order to make space for the new ones, because just marking them for deletion doesn't actually free up space, we would need to compact the blob store. So using this task, let's actually call it compact. And this is going to be the blob store that we would want to compact. And the snapshots repository is actually using default blob store. And this is task frequency. So when we want it to execute, we can also set this either manually, so you can trigger it yourself. So once the cleanup policy runs and it actually soft deletes the components from the repository or from the blob store, you can then go and execute this task, or you can also set it daily. And you can configure it to run right after the first cleanup task. So here I'm going to choose next day. So our cleanup task is scheduled for tomorrow. So we can schedule it 3, for example, and create a task. And here you see first the cleanup service task will run at this time, and then compact store task will run. However, in order to just test our cleanup policy, we can actually manually execute it whenever we need, instead of waiting for its automatic execution. So I'm going to run it. And we see the last result is okay. So the policy got applied. And now if I go back to repositories and Maven snapshots, so the Maven snapshots repository is empty. All the components got deleted. However, as I mentioned, this doesn't actually delete the components from the disk, from the server where Nexus is storing components. So if you go back to blob stores, here you see the default blob store still has components stored, and this is the amount of space they're occupying. So the components got deleted from the repository. However, they're still on the disk. They're just marked for deletion as a result of a cleanup task. So in order to delete components from the disk as well, from the content directory here, and just empty all its contents, we actually have to execute this compact store task. So now we're going to go back and manually execute the task that compacts the store, the blob store, which is the default blob store. So I'm going to run it. And it just got executed. So in the store, in the default store, which we configured for the compact store task, we have content and some other directories inside. Let's just choose one of those. And you see all of those are empty. And also, if I go back to Nexus and blob stores, you see the blob count now shows the files have been removed. So it physically got deleted from the disk once we executed the compact store task.